Well, farmers like to talk about trucks. So today, I thought I would talk about all the trucks I've had over the course of the years. A quick disclaimer, a lot of these pictures are going to be pictures that I've just pulled off of the internet because I don't have pictures of my own trucks, with a couple of exceptions, and I'll mention that. But anyway, when I was 16 years old, uh, I was a I was a very much a gearhead, and I ended up with a 1949 Chevy half-ton pickup with a six-cylinder and a three on the tree. And when I got it, the engine was blown up. At that time, a buddy of mine was junking out a '56 Chevy car that had a 235 six-cylinder engine that would fit in it. So I got that for my buddy and overhauled it, put it in this truck, and I think I drove this truck around a couple of years. I think during high school I had this truck. I guess the most memorable thing about this truck for me was this era of pickups had the brake master cylinders with a single reservoir. And of course, if you'd blow a wheel cylinder, you'd lose all your fluid and lose all your brakes. So I remember once or twice having to blowing a wheel cylinder, losing all the brakes, and driving home very carefully, and rebuilding the wheel cylinder. I'm not sure that was such a good idea, but that's what I did. And then, right after I graduated from high school, I was 18 years old, and I picked up this 1964 Chevy half-ton pickup. And this is a picture of my actual truck. This picture, I think, would be from about 1976 or something like that. But yeah, this is a picture of my truck, and I'll switch over to this picture off the internet to show you what the front end of one of these trucks looks like. But this truck had originally been a six-cylinder, three on the tree truck, and when I got it, someone had swapped in a 327 cubic inch V8 from some sort of a Chevy car. I don't remember what, but it was a 327 four barrel still with the three on the tree. It burned a lot of oil, so I pulled the engine out and overhauled it. And I pulled the bench seat out, swapped in a couple of bucket seats, and pulled the three-speed transmission out and swapped in an aluminum M21 Muncie four-speed out of some sort of a muscle car. I don't remember what right now, but yeah, it was I had to have I had to use the bucket seats in order to have room for the shifter for the automotive four-speed, but it was kind of a trick deal. I don't know how fast it really was now, but it sure seemed fast at the time with the fresh 327 four barrel and the four-speed, and of course it being a six-cylinder truck originally, I think it had a pretty slow rear ended anyway, which helped the acceleration. But it was a fun truck to play around with. I had that truck for probably maybe about 4 years, 3 or 4 years, something like that. So it was a lot of fun. And it's kind of hard to keep the chronology straight here on these trucks because there was a lot of overlap. I usually owned more than one truck at a time. But at any rate, sometime during the mid to late 1970s, I picked up not this one, but I picked up a 1954 GMC one-ton dually that looked kind of like this one here. And like this one, the one I had a grain and fold-down stock racks on it. And I used this truck to haul cattle with. In the 1970s, there wasn't a lot of cattle trailers around here, if any, that I remember. Everybody that hauled cattle used either a pickup with stock racks on it, or a one-ton truck, or a deuce and a half ton with stock racks. But so that's what I did too. I didn't haul grain, but I hauled cattle with this one and whatever else I needed to haul. My truck had a little, I believe it was a 248 cubic inch GMC six-cylinder engine. And of course, if you're not familiar, at that time, the GMC six-cylinder engines were completely different. They were a completely different engine than the Chevy six-cylinder engines at the time. And behind this engine, it had a old Hydromatic four-speed automatic, a cast iron four-speed automatic transmission from that era. They were kind of a weird deal. There was no park on them. You shut them off and pulled them all the way down into reverse, and that would effectively be your park. That would lock them. Then it was a little different. The Hydromatic worked good in this one. Again, it was when I got it. It burned a lot of oil. I pulled the engine and overhauled it. It was a solid truck. I think it had come from somewhere down around central Illinois before I got it. So I had this for a few years. I remember it had a really oddball tire. It had like 18-inch tires on it, which was kind of weird. But anyway, here's a picture of a little nicer looking one. But yeah, this was about like the one I had. And, well, it was 1976 when I bought my farm here from my grandparents. So after a couple of years, I decided I needed a little better truck than the old 64 Chevy. So I think it was in 1978, I bought I bought a 1975 Chevy 3/4 ton two-wheel drive. I don't remember. It was supposed to have a 350 cubic inch small block engine. It had a turbo 350 three-speed automatic. But again, it didn't have a lot of powers, and I decided to look into it and found out that someone must have blown up the 350, and they had actually swapped a 307 cubic inch older small block engine into it. So as it happened, I happened to have a 350 Buick engine laying around. And if you're not familiar with cars in that era, Chevrolet, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac all had a 350 cubic inch engine, all of them completely different. Nothing interchanged between any of them. But anyway, I happen to have a good 350 Buick laying around with a turbo 400 transmission behind it, so I fabricated my motor mounts and dropped that in there, and it was a pretty decent truck for a couple of years. And then by the time 1980 rolled around, I was feeling relatively prosperous, so I went and bought myself a brand new four-wheel drive truck. And this is my truck. This is a 1980 Chevy half-ton four-wheel drive. This one had a 250 cubic inch six-cylinder and a three-speed automatic transmission. Back in the day, it was a pretty decent truck. That little 250 cubic inch six-cylinder had pretty decent power. It had the split exhaust manifold, so it had two pipes coming off the engine. It had a 2-barrel carburetor. It worked like a 4-barrel. It had one primary and a secondary. When you opened it up, the secondary would open it up. So it had pretty good power. I had this truck for 3 years, and I at that time, after I had this truck, I had a cattle trailer, that 16-foot cattle trailer that I pulled around and pulled some other stuff around. Did quite a bit of trailering with it, and I think I worked it too hard. So after 3 years, I ended up burning a piston in it. So I burnt a hole in one of the pistons. So I tore the engine down, put a new piston in it, and of course, when I had it apart, I looked, and the head was cracked in a few places. And of course, my understanding is that the 250 engines of this era, they all cracked. So at any rate, I put a new piston in it, put it back together, got it all patched up, and decided to trade it off. And so I traded the 1980 Chevy off for a 1983 F150 four-wheel drive with the 306 cylinder in it and granny low 4-speed. It was kind of a plain Jane truck. I bought it off a lot, right off of a dealer's lot. It was didn't have a lot of accessories on it, but it wasn't a bad truck. Of course, the 300 cubic inch 6 cylinders are a really good engine. And I had this truck for 2 or 3 years, but again, it was a half ton, and I was afraid that, like I did with the Chevy, I was afraid I was working it to death. I come to the conclusion that I really needed a bigger truck for the things I was doing. So then I traded this truck off. In the meantime, at some point in the mid-1980s, I picked up a 1976 Chevy 3/4 ton 2-wheel drive truck as kind of a beater truck, a little heavier truck to pull trailers with. I picked it up for practically nothing because it had no engine or transmission in it and it was rusty. I put, I think, 1 or 2 replacement fenders on it, cheap replacement fenders. I welded new door bottoms onto it and new cab corners. I tore the bed off and built a wooden flatbed. And for an engine, at first, I had a 455 cubic inch Oldsmobile engine in this truck because for some reason I happened to have one laying around, so I put that in there. That was in there for a while, and then I believe for some reason it came out of there. From what I remember, I think someone wanted that engine, so I pulled it out and sold it to him. And then I come across a Chevy 402 cubic inch big block. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but in the late 1960s, Chevy had a 396 big block. And the last year or two that they made those engines, for some reason they bored them 30 thousandths oversized and made a 402 out of them. But anyway, that was what I put in the truck later after I'd sold the Oldsmobile engine. And I used it, like I said, to kind of beat around the farm. It was great for pulling trailers. It had good power with both engines in. And I got rid of that truck. I didn't need it anymore after I bought my next Ford. And so I believe it was 1986 that I traded my F-150 off, and I bought a 1984 F-250 four-wheel drive with a 460 cubic inch engine and an automatic transmission. And this was one of my favorite all-time trucks. I really liked that truck a lot. I had that truck for 12 years and kept it until really it rusted into the ground. It had great power, was really reliable. I really liked that truck. It did a great job for me. I had it for about 6 years, and then the box started to get rusty. So after 6 years, I welded new cab corners on it, took the box off, and put a brand new steel flatbed on it, which I really liked. That worked out really, really well. Then ran it for another 6 years, and I ended up junking the truck out because it just rotted right into the ground. Boy, that was a great truck. I really liked that truck. And we're going to get into a little overlap here. Sometime, I don't remember exactly when, but sometime in the late 1980s, I picked up I believe it was a 1982 GMC S15. 2-wheel drive, regular cab, automatic. 2.8 V6. I picked this up just to kind of putz around, to kind of something cheap to drive around. This truck, it really wasn't a bad truck. A little truck, got good gas mileage, of course. It was nice to putter around with. I think I owned this for maybe either a year or 2 years. I kept this for a while, and eventually the transmission started slipping a little bit in reverse, and it would do that occasionally, and I just didn't want to mess with it, so I went ahead and traded this off. And I traded the S15 off for a 1986 half-ton Chevy pickup, two-wheel drive. Now this picture, of course, is one I pulled off the internet, but it's going to seem like deja vu, because as it happens, over the years, I owned two 86 Chevy pickups. But right now, we're just going to talk about the first one. And the first one I owned was this 86 half-ton. Like I said, I traded the S15 for the 86 half-ton. Two-wheel drive. It had a 305 cubic inch V8 automatic transmission. And again, it served kind of the same purpose as the S15, only it was a little bigger. It was something so I didn't have to drive the big four-wheel drive truck around all the time. Something to kind of, I guess it was my good vehicle at the time. So I remember I had it for maybe 3 years. It's hard to remember. It's been a while. So my impression is that I had it for maybe 3 years or so. And so that gets us up to about the mid-1990s and covers about half of the herd. So I'll continue this. We'll finish this off, finish the rest of the trucks, and get us up to the present time in the next video. So this is kind of interesting for me, remembering all this stuff. I hope you find it interesting too. So until next time, have a good day.